The New World expansion is having huge success, and I do think it is very much well deserved. But that's not to say that it's perfect, so we're going to talk about how it's been successful, what they've changed, and what they probably should change in the future to make it even better. Now don't worry, we're not just going to look at the Steam charts here, but I just want to show the success, so let's sort of try and quantify it. The peak players since the launch of the expansion has been 77,000. At the time of recording, they're actually currently on 71,000. But that's the tail end of the Sunday evening. Now, the actual peak for Brimstone Sands has been surpassed. Now, you might be looking at this 137 here and thinking, well, we're not at that level. Well, that was actually Fresh Start servers that did this. Brimstone Sands actually came out in October. I can't remember the exact date. I think it might have been like October 18th or something like that. And then Fresh Start came out in November. I think maybe like November 2nd or 3rd. And you can see we hit 69,000 then. Nice. And as I've just shown you, we hit 77,000. Now, for me, that is sort of to be a little bit expected, that your paid expansion creates more hype than a free patch, essentially. But still, it's good to see this because another year has progressed. We did hit low numbers in the summer because obviously we were sort of like the calm before the expansion, but it's nice to see this happen. Now, of course, this number will not stick around. I don't think we're going to go up to the Fresh Start because that sort of creates a lot of hype just by itself because people are like, oh, now's the perfect time to try it. But honestly, this expansion is like a soft reset in a way anyway. I would recommend people who are interested in the game to play it right now, and I think this success is deserved, and let's talk about that. Honestly, the game has changed so much since launch. Now, you might even be like, where am I? Depending when you last saw New World, you might be confused. Everfall had a complete overhaul, basically. All the buildings and all that kind of stuff was changed, and you might be like, I don't even recognize it. Well, no, it's called Oxborough, and the actual zone is Everfall, and we had updates. They have basically reworked the whole MSQ up until about level 55, and it will be finalized now, I think, at the end of this year. I'm not going to claim that the questing is like the best questing in the genre or anything like that, but it is a hell of a lot better than when the game launched. It's a lot easier to get to 60. It's just a better experience. The story's told in a better way. There's actual cutscenes and all that kind of good stuff. The game is just different. And as I said, this isn't going to be a comprehensive list of everything that has changed since launch, but some of the big ones include the removal of Ward, Bane, and Resilient. So these were basically PvE and PvP perks respectively, and they've been removed, and that opens up the diversity of builds, and it also makes getting into content a little bit easier and a little bit more approachable. Now, I can't really show this, right? Like, I can't show you gear that doesn't have Ward on it. Now, it's worth keeping in mind, Ward should have been changed to health. You can see here this one has health, it doesn't have Ward on it, and Ward isn't actually supposed to be dropping, so if you do see something like that, it will be a bug and it will get tidied up. I wouldn't really worry about it too much. But Bane is technically still in the game. Some of the weapons have it. Now, it has actually been nerfed, but the old stuff has Bane. None of the new gear in the expansion is actually dropping Bane. Again, if you do see Bane, it is supposed to be a bug. And what that means is you could have one set of gear, and honestly, whilst this is actually more my PvP build, this gear right here, I could rock into a dungeon and maybe do like an M2. If you don't know what an M2 is, like a mutation 2, another good change that they did is they actually had 10 mutations and they've squished them down to 3, so that's a little bit easier to find groups. A group finder that is like an automatic group finder is coming at the end of this year, another good change. And honestly, this now makes getting into content way more approachable. There's way less prep. One of the best changes they've done. I mean, speaking about dungeons, you might be at a time, you may have played this game when to get into like a dungeon, you actually needed a key. That's not the case anymore. You can literally just find a group and go straight in. You don't need to pay to get in. That's all changed. And the end game in general has just completely like sort of expanded. There's way more dungeons now, probably like 8. We have a proper raid, we have a seasonal trial. There's a lot more end game content. There's not as much content as maybe I would like, but then again, I am a hardcore player at this point. I've played like several thousands of hours, but I think like the end game is so improved, it's insane. Another change is that the high watermark gear score is gone. You now just have your gear score. There's no hidden stat. At one point they made that hidden stat a not so hidden stat and you still had to grind it, but that's gone as well. That just makes getting gear feel much more rewarding. The progression now feels like a proper MMO. And I have to say, I really enjoy that. I'm not going to talk about absolutely everything. I'm not going to talk about how like Outpost Rush is now cross-server. I'm not going to talk about the content they added with extra weapons and all that kind of stuff. Just know that the content has been improved. It was improved like sometime during the launch to the expansion. Some of the changes were a little bit like more subtle and over time. And then the expansion has come in and done some walloping changes to progression, like the gear score and all that kind of good stuff. Bane and Ward Resilient being removed, etc. In my opinion, the success of the expansion very much deserved. But as I said at the start, it's not perfect. There have been issues. Now, one of the pain points I've found with this expansion is something that we've seen multiple times. We saw it at launch and we saw it with Brimstone as well, and that is simply server queues. Now, when you do new content for an MMO, queuing is not unexpected. However, I don't think AGS have really taken the bull by the horns and tried to do something about it in a way that I think would really benefit most players. They've done some things and we're going to talk about them in a minute, but if we have a look at Marama, for example, right now, there is a queue of 2,500 people just waiting to play the game. But you may be aware that they have increased the server size. They actually tested a server size today of 3,500, but they've walked that back a little bit, so I sort of suspect it was destroying some of the servers or something. However, they've upped this. At launch, it was at 2,000, and at this point, we're at 3,000. They sort of did that in like 250 increments, but, you know, that's where we are. They have opened new servers and all that kind of stuff, and they have actually changed the transfer cooldown from a full month to 1 day, but still I think they could have done more. You still have to go into the game to transfer off, and I understand there's some technical challenges if you did it my way. It would be great though if you could transfer server from the main menu. That would be absolutely sensational. Like if you literally got in the queue and it was like, hey, you're in a massive queue, do you want to transfer off? I think that would be really good. And they do this thing where if you've not been on for a long time, you basically get kicked off your server, and then when you log back on, you have to pick a server. And I'm okay with that, but what it's meant is that some people could not play with their friends, and that feels really bad. And one thing that they could do if they really wanted to help, maybe on a server like Marama, maybe they could actually give people a free transfer token. And I suspect they're not doing that to penny pinch. Like they're not giving that out because they've not got the money to do so. I think it would actually just cost them a lot of time and effort because if there's like technical challenges with the merging. I think merging just isn't perfect, honestly. So there's like a lot of customer support involved as well. And I think it's just a pain for them. So they don't want to do that. And it might also cause issue with bots and stuff like that, which I can't obviously consider at this point because I don't understand it. But they could do a little bit more, I think, in this regard. And if they really want a successful MMO in the long run, then they're probably going to have to. Even if it's not New World, maybe they'll have to do it with Lord of the Rings. Now, there have been some issues with the launch, like technically as well, like bugs and that kind of stuff. They have addressed a lot of these. I'm not going to go through them all. One of them is the fact that the season pass was just balked, and they've mostly fixed that, but some people have lost progression and that's feeling really bad. At some point you're going to get your progression back according to AGS, but for now it's just sort of gone and you've got to redo it. Just doesn't feel very nice. There were some issues about people not being able to do the MSQ, but I did that I think yesterday and completely had no issues. There are some quests where I'm like, they probably need to consider their quest design a little bit better. Specifically ones where there's like a timer on a quest item that everybody has to pick up. There's one quest that was like becoming a little bit infamous, which was tracking the herd, and effectively I think you're picking up poop, but people were literally doing the classic thing of making their own line because like taking turns was just more effective than everybody sat there like pressing E. So they need to think about that a little bit beforehand. Also, in a further update, they've mostly fixed the faction reputation issue. Some people couldn't get their faction rep to the next level, and that was causing some frustrations because that's actually tied to the progression in the game at the minute when crafting. That's mostly fixed for everybody except some marauders, and who cares about the marauders anyway? The big thing that they actually did was add one of the artifacts into the game because there was a boss who simply wasn't spawning, and I spent 4 hours on stream farming this. My chat asked for it, and then I did it, and I'm not sure we were happier for it, but I got it. I mean, it's a little bit awkward to see, but this was a screenshot I was sent today. When I went there wasn't quite this many people, but boy, a lot of people were focused there, and it was a little bit laggy, but fair enough, that was actually sort of fun. So while issues with the season pass and those kind of things are a little bit problematic, I don't have a huge issue with them. Yes, I think they need to consider their quest design, so that some of this doesn't reoccur. You should never have a situation where other people can basically grief you or stop you doing a quest. It doesn't really make sense too much. For example, you were able to put like your tent on a quest area, and they just need to think about that a little bit more before they launch. And I do think they need to think about some systems a little bit more before they launch. Specifically, a couple of things have changed recently that drastically affect the progression of the game. One of them is this. So they fixed an issue that caused the story mode expeditions to drop loot at their intended level. Basically, story modes are the easy version of dungeons to sort of make it more casual friendly. Like if you're not very good at games, basically, they don't want you to be excluded, so you can go ahead and do the story mode. I think that's a good change. I'm happy with that personally. However, for the first like 4 days, the gear score from that, like the quality of the gear was just simply too good. We all knew it because they'd said in a video diary that it was supposed to be up to gear score 685. And of course, they went ahead and fixed it. Interestingly, it's actually 685 only for the Savage Divide and 675 for the others. I didn't realize that. They just said 685 in the videos, but fair enough. Now, I don't have a problem with them fixing this. Obviously, they should. My problem is the fact that this was, for example, definitely in the PTR and definitely game changing when it comes to progression. Anybody who got in early and was doing those dungeons early has an advantage over anybody who tried to do it later. It's as simple as that. And that is a trend that always happens with New World. They did it with chest runs at the launch of the game. They were getting too high expertise, so they stopped it, and anybody who came after didn't get that. So you either did your chest runs early or you lost out. That's the same with M10s. M10s were a little bit easier at the start, and then they made it harder. Crafting at launch was sort of relatively easy, and then they basically nerfed it and it became almost like twice as hard. It was very, very, very much dramatically increased. And Great Cleave, the PvP missions, that was very strong. Everybody sort of knew it. You should have done it, and then if you don't do it, you miss out. Simple as that. That's a trend that they constantly do. And really, my issue isn't that they shouldn't fix this one and all the other ones that I mentioned. My issue is that they shouldn't have made it into the game in the first place. Not when something is as important as the progression of your game. Like, that's what your main changes are, and you didn't fix this, then it was on the PTR. Like, that really needs to get sorted. That kind of thing should not slip through the cracks, in my opinion, because it leaves everybody who comes after feeling really bad. And actually, it just screws up progression. So it needs sorting. And it didn't just happen once, it happened twice. So basically, they have made aptitude much harder to do. Now, I don't want to go into too much details because I'm sort of going to confuse people, I think. But basically, aptitude is the system once you hit max professions, okay? Getting from 200 to 250, by the way, in all the professions is unchanged. But getting the aptitude afterwards has been increased by a lot. Basically, I think Armoring went from about 1.7 million to about 4.8 million. 3 times as much, basically. Now, again, that's not a bad change on the face of it. It's just the fact that they did it 4 days after the launch. So many people, especially like the rich warloggers, got all of the materials easily and cheaply. And then everybody else is sort of left, oh, I'm a little bit out of pocket, I'm a little bit behind. So if you get in early and you're the hardcore players, you often get advantage, not just because you are the hardcore players, but because the game advantages you as well. And that sort of needs to stop. Now, there is one change that was actually done before the expansion went live, but people are feeling a little bit bad about it, and I sort of agree and sort of don't agree. It's a little bit weird. So basically, at the Gypsum Kilns, you can still upgrade named items. Instead of using Umbral Shards, you now come here, and the upgrade requires a shed ton of mats, basically, and something that's a little bit time gated. I think it's the time gating that gets me the most. So basically, you can upgrade a named item. I'm not going to go through the system here, but it does require 3 chromatic seals, like a matrix, which is quite expensive as well. And a lot of people are unhappy that it requires 3. Now, it's a little bit weird that because in the patch notes it says it required 1, and in the PTR it didn't require any. Now, these are 5,000 gold a pop. Now, the problem with this is some named items that you can upgrade are effectively best in slot, and some of them are pure bait. So 3 is just like a little bit weird. I can sort of see them maybe walking this back at some point, but it actually sort of makes sense if you're getting best in slot. It's just a very easy bait for some people to maybe fall into, and I'm not really sure what the solution is here. I think there's too many named items, frankly. What they could have done is have less named items and then made them expensive to upgrade because they knew the quality. It sort of feels like there's way too many, so they just have to cover all their bases. I mean, in theory, they could go ahead and change the individual value of the seals depending on how powerful the item is, but I can't see them putting in that effort. And I think one of the problems is that it's very much feels like artificial time gating, because if I come over here and we see how often you can buy these, I actually haven't bought mine for the day. The Azov Inductor is once per week. I'm not going to explain what that is, but basically you can craft best in slot items. And then the Chromatic Seal, which you can use for the named items, you can also craft very good items with this in its own right. That's once per day. And I think the thing that bugs me is that this is very artificial. For some reason, the daily cooldown mats don't really bug me. I actually don't mind that system. But this, it just rubs me the wrong way. And it's not really a major issue or anything like that. I just don't like it. But many people are a little bit annoyed by the amount that you would need for the named items, because there is a lot of good stuff in there actually. It might end up being that a lot of people's gear is literally the named items. So it sort of makes sense. I just sort of had this vision where it was going to be like named items, chromatic seals, and then Azov Inductors. Turns out it might be a little bit like the other way around. It might be Chromatic Seal, then named items, then Azov Inductor. All a little bit weird. We'll see how that plays out. I'm not 100% sure. Now, one last thing I really want to address is content. I've made this analogy on my stream. Basically, I've enjoyed the majority of what Amazon have put on my plate. I've enjoyed it. However, it's a little bit like a fancy restaurant. The portion size is a little bit meager. There's not actually that much in it. Sure, the MSQ is fine and enjoyable, and sure, the rework zone is sort of decent. Beyond that, we have the whole progression changes, again, all good, but we only have one endgame edition, and that's one new expedition, of which I'm not really sure we needed more of. What I feel like we needed was maybe like a battleground, like an outpost rush alternative. I feel like we need ranked arena, but that's probably going to come when we get cross server. To be fair, they probably should have brought cross-server dungeons and arena into the expansion, but fair enough, they didn't. It'll be soon, I think. And I do feel like a zone that wasn't a rework zone would have made people feel a little bit better. And the actual end game needs to be expanded upon. We've had like one raid boss. We now need actual proper raids with multiple bosses, multiple like trash mobs and all that kind of stuff. Probably around 10 to 20 people in it. Best gear you can get, boom. Do it. You do all of that and people will feel good about it. At this point, the progression system, as fun as it is going to sort of tap out, and then people will literally tap out. They'll just leave. And that's fine. I'm okay with that because I think people are going to actually enjoy their experience. Let's get content now. Let's get end game content. I need that to be on the roadmap when we see it. I would have loved to have seen the roadmap before the expansion, so people sort of knew what they were buying. People are complaining about paying $30 and maybe the value of the expansion and stuff like that. Well, you're getting the next year's content at least. So it would have been nice to see what they were offering. Without it, you sort of are buying a little bit in the dark. And that's just the way it is. So for me, I'm pretty happy with what they've given us. I think the success is deserved. They've come a very, very long way, and the game really feels like an MMO at this point, I think. However, there's a few little issues that they need to solve. Like the progression issues where the hardcore get there first and then everybody else is sort of behind. I don't really like that because the hardcore are going to get there first anyway. You don't need to advantage them, if that makes sense. Stop doing it. They've done it many times. And finally, obviously, content, end game content. That's going to be where this game really truly shines. If we can just actually get there instead of us all thinking it's going to be coming soon, let's actually see it, and let's actually see it on the roadmap, hopefully very soon. Big shout out to my Patreons. Again, I really need to add some people there. I do really apologize, but big shout out to my patrons and my YouTube members. And if you want to come follow me over on Twitch, I've been streaming every day. I think I've streamed every day for like the last 2 weeks, so you do not want to miss out. I mean, today I farmed the same mob for 4 hours, and I mean, oh man, it was very exciting. I'm sure you can imagine, guys. Like, come on, please, I need that ad revenue in those Twitch subs. Twitch Prime, anyone? Other than that, guys, I hope you have a most beautiful day. Like and subscribe. Goodbye.